Welcome to another episode of Pound for Pound Boxing Report, episode 439. I'm your host, Michael. Join me, per usual, Gail from nyfights.com, Daniel from 4 Boxing News, and the Inscriber. What's going on, lady and gent?
There's good news tonight. None of us has been injured in training, and we are here for the Pound for Pound Boxing Report as booked.
Or making tweets that has the boxing community just scratching their heads. That part.
Well, the night's
those,
still young for that. I'm just saying, let's just give ourselves some wiggle room.
for
No
those,
torn biceps, no eye surgery, no torn Achilles. Yeah,
yeah.
let's go.
For those who are new to Pound for Pound Boxing Report, Pound for Pound Boxing Report, live YouTube show, podcast, blog, website, etc., talking all things boxing. The motto is when boxing is good, we will talk about it. When it's bad, we'll talk about it. Bottom line is, if it concerns the sweet science, it will get discussed. If you want to find any and all information about Pound for Pound Boxing Report, the site is the place to go to for the time being. P4P, P4pboxingreport.com. If you wish to email us with any questions or comments, you can do so. P4pboxing at P4pboxingreport.com. On the site, you will find links to where to check us out all over social media, links to the YouTube page, YouTube channel, Facebook, Twitter, IG page, also links to where to find the show all over the podcast realm, be it Spotify, be it Anchor, be it Google Podcasts, be it Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. You should be able to find Pound for Pound Box Report. If you wish to donate, got a Cash Me PayPal donation link. I believe it was Beagle, who's listening live, who sent us a donation a few weeks back. Appreciate that. Cash Me PayPal donation links, last but certainly not least, for my fitness enthusiast. For those who are looking to get their body right as we head into the spring, into the warmer weather, please check out the link to BODI, Body, formerly known as Beachbody On Demand, body programs for any and all suitable fitness interests and goals. If you're looking to lift weights, have a couple programs for that. Lift 4, lift more. If you're looking for hardcore functional HIIT CrossFit style workouts, please check out programs like Chop Wood, Carry Water, 6 weeks of the work, 645, etc. If you're looking for a morning specific meltdown program, for those who like to get their workouts in the morning, check out programs like Morning Meltdown. If you are yoga, Pilates enthusiast, programs for that as well. If you're looking for a boxing specific program, check out 10 Rounds. That is a 6-week program, 3 days of boxing based cardio, 2 days of weightlifting. At the very least, take advantage of the 14-day trial, which runs throughout the year, and that is, should you enact it for 14 days, you get free access to any and all programs on Body, including the sample workout for the soon to be released new program on Body, Dig Deeper. Let's get things going. Light amount of boxing this week. Actually going to be it for the this upcoming week as well. But we're here, so is boxing to talk about. The main card took place on the Zone. Golden Boy promoted event. Main event of this gala was William Zepeda, who we talked about last week, has been receiving plenty of buzz in the boxing community, particularly those from the West Coast, the Southwest area of the United States. Highly ranked 135-pounder. He fought Maxi Hughes, who many people remember being robbed, and I use that word purposely. I don't use it often, but in this case, I believe it was against George Kambosos last year. Zepeda, Hughes fought WBA, IBF eliminator, and Zepeda, he does what he does, Gail. Very, very strong, very, very aggressive. I think he has some subtle boxing skills that is not appreciated enough, but he took care of business against Hughes. And after the fight, even before the fight, Zepeda's promoter, Golden Boy, calling out Shakur Stevenson, right? Current WBC champion at 135 pounds. I don't know if Zepeda would beat a Shakur. if I had to make a prediction right now, I would go with Shakur. However, it's a fight that I want to see. The more I see Zepeda, the more I'm impressed by him. He deserves a title shot ASAP.
He absolutely does. Now let's remember back to that fight with Kambosos. Whether you thought Hughes legitimately won or not, he gave a great accounting of himself. It was a very competitive fight. Saturday, not so much. Zepeda blasted through Hughes. It was like a knife. It was like a knife through butter. Seriously, it was an impressive display. Hughes came out firing from the opening bell, and I thought, okay, this could be very interesting. Good for him. He went right to Zepeda and got busy, and it appeared that he would be the busier fighter in the first round. Zepeda kind of let him do his thing for a couple of minutes halfway through the round and then got down to work. And as I'm
Play with him, Gail. Play with him.
I'm looking at the punch stats for the first round, and although Hughes appeared very busy, Zepeda had already outlanded him 20 punches to 15, and it never got any better. In the course of 4 rounds, Zepeda beat the daylights out of Hughes. And in a fight like this, it is almost worse than those one-punch knockouts where a guy is obliterated out cold for a few seconds, gets up, barely remembers it, his face is still clean, and he thinks everything's fine. And in the long run, it does do less damage. Hughes looked like he'd been tied to the bumper of a truck and been drug along a road after the fight. He was in bad shape. And that was his face. Of the punches that Zepeda landed in 4 rounds, mind you, 58 of them were body shots. 58 body shots. Zepeda is a master of the Mexican body attack like nobody I've seen. There have been a lot of amazing Mexican body punchers, but in volume like this, whoa, he is a tough guy to be standing across from. I don't care who you are. He's absolutely earned his right to face the top names. You're right, though, Michael. Could he beat a Shakur Stevenson? Could he beat a Tank Davis? It's hard to say. But has he earned the right? You bet he has. The sanctioning bodies recognize it. No matter how the fight comes out, it's darned to be entertaining. And I dare say a fighter like Shakur Stevenson gets nothing but benefit from fighting a guy like William Zepeda because he is starting to get a reputation. Shakur is a boring, stink-em-out fighter, despite his winning record. A good fight against somebody like Zepeda would go a long way in resurrecting young Shakur Stevenson's reputation. And I think that he would step up. He's one of those guys who rises to the level of his opposition. And Shakur can bang when he has to. It's just that he's very much like Andre Ward in this way. He only bangs when he has to. Well, Zepeda will make him bang. So give me Shakur versus Zepeda. I am there.
Now, Stevenson has a fight upcoming in early July, the first week of July, Daniel. Mm-hmm. He said immediately after this fight with Zepeda and Hughes that bring him on, willing to fight him. The likelihood of seeing a Stevenson-Zepeda fight, whether in July when Stevenson makes his return to the ring or at some point this year?
It's pretty high because Zepeda has earned himself the rankings with this type of fighting style. And Shakur, we have to remember, he is one of Bob's projects when it comes to trying to make a star, particularly an African-American star. And unfortunately, like you mentioned, Mike, and like Gail mentioned too, he unfortunately does not have the best reputation right now as far as making a good, exciting fight. He'll win, but he does it in a fashion that's not very aesthetically pleasing. Zepeda may actually take him out of that comfort zone and show Shakur's full skill set. And he's going to need it too, because Zepeda to me is becoming what I figured Leo Santa Cruz would be, with better defense. And we have to remember, prime Leo Santa Cruz, once his motor started, it did not stop. But he also got hit too at the same time. Zepeda has better defense. He has better footwork. And they're guiding him fairly well. Now, Shakur's one avenue. I'm going to throw another one that, yeah, the promotional hurdles are there, but would probably be just as exciting. What about Zepeda versus Tank? Because you're not, Tank's, yes, going to be the smaller guy again, but he's going to have to face somebody now that is not simply just going to try to outpunch you and then not care about the defense, not care about the footwork. He's going to present a pretty interesting challenge for Tank should Golden Boy decide to go that avenue. Shakur is the more likely option because Oscar and Bob at this stage do like to work together. But either one of those two options, Zepeda has earned it, and he has a fairly good chance against either.
Comment here from What You Need, who's listening to us live while it looks like Beagle and Gail are having a conversation about breakfast for dinner. What You Need says that Zepeda and Stevenson would be a good exciting fight. That is a great fight to make. I will favor Shakur, but Zepeda is a big, strong fighter. Daniel put the option out there, the other option out there, Zepeda and Tank. We all know Tank is going to fight Frank Martin coming up this summer. Should he get by that, Gail? Thoughts on the fight between Tank Davis? Well, Abdul Wahid now. Now that he's made the conversion, Abdul Wahid, and William Zepeda.
Yes, and we should get used to calling him that, which is why all of us are reverting to just still calling him Tank. It's hard to remember. I'm more interested in a fight with Stevenson because of the style matchup. I think that Zepeda would give Tank one of the toughest fights of his career. And I think it might be very much like the first half of the fight that we saw against Leo Santa Cruz. But I don't think Zepeda is likely to get caught in the same way that Santa Cruz was. I think he's a tough test for virtually anybody in the division. The other fight that I have heard talked up is Subriel Matias and Zepeda, potentially. They've been sparring partners, which sort of blows my head off to think about that. But Stevenson seems to be the obvious choice. Top Rank and Golden Boy have worked together, so there's no promotional issues. You know, I think putting Tank and Zepeda together, given that means, we're going to see forces tangling between PBC and Leonard Ellerby and Oscar De La Hoya. It was messy enough when it was Tank versus Ryan. I'm not sure we're going to see a repeat of that again anytime soon. And we have to remember, Tank's been off the shelf a while. I think I'd reserve judgment about that until I see how he looks against Frank Martin. And with fighters dropping like flies lately, which is what we were talking about prior to the show and what the boxing world is talking about here in the last day or two, I think we got to look for the ones that are active and healthy right now.
Indeed, we'll keep you updated on what's upcoming for Zepeda. All this talk about him and Shakur. Will that happen? We will see. On the undercard of Zepeda and Maxi Hughes, Floyd Schofield, Daniel, up and coming. I think he's only 21. You're 135 pounder, right? Highly ranked already. Fought a guy by the name of Suero, excuse me. And it was hard to get anything from this fight because it was so rough and dirty, quote unquote, particularly from Suero's side. Schofield got the win by stoppage, but him, the fighter, and particularly his dad, talks an awful lot about they're ready for this fighter, they're ready for that, they're ready for the big time. Despite the win here, based on what I saw in this fight, I'm like, wait a minute. Now, you're still young. Develop a little bit more before you up here talking about the biggest and the best at 135 pounds.
Yeah, this was a tough fight to judge in some ways how far Schofield has progressed as a prospect because of the manner that Suero fought. Now, I will say this, though. You always want a good top prospect to face a fighter like Suero. Somebody that's going to be rough around the edges and try to see how far he can take the rule book as far as bending it and possibly breaking it, which Suero did, and test the patience and the temperament of the prospect. Because based on the way that Suero fought, from the headbutts to the excessive holding to the attempted power slam, and then ultimately the low blow that pushed the referee to disqualify Suero. You always want to see how fighter would react in that area, because Schofield would have every right to try to go off on Suero at that point. But he remained calm. He was a little bit erratic. You still see that he does lunge a little bit when it comes to lunging forward and reaching out to his opponent, and you could tell that is still a factor, because in the second round that wound up resulting in an accidental headbutt. But you see the pieces. You see the foundation being built as far as how far Schofield can go in this division. And keep in mind, he is just 21 years old. He still has plenty of time to grow. And yeah, we know, since they're both a Golden Boy, and Golden Boy like to test their fighters, if it comes to the situation where it could be Schofield versus Zepeda at some point, you want to see Schofield be a little bit more seasoned before he faces that type of challenge, or somebody like Shakur, or possibly even Tank. The main issue that's probably going to matter with Schofield's got to be remaining active, and in many ways, reining your father in, because we've seen over the past couple of years fathers landing their sons in pretty hot water when it comes to fights and overall behavior, whether it would be in the ring, post-fight interview, social media. It's those type of things that Schofield is going to make sure to control, to show that he's ready to take that next step, because you have the confidence to be a good fighter, but you still need a little bit of seasoning before you can seriously go from prospect to contender.
You know who I want to see him fight? Let's set up a battle of young up and coming fighters in that weight range between Schofield and Abdullah Mason.
Oh, that's good.
I'm not sure either of the promoters are going to give up the undefeated records of these young guys so early, but somewhere down the road, you betcha.
That's what I want to see. It makes sense to me. Mason has some words for Schofield on Twitter following the fight. The two have history going back to their amateur days.
They sure do.
Let's let the power that be make that happen. A battle of young
But
guns.
when they get closer to having 20 fights under their belt than 10, I think you'll see it happen. But that's probably another year or two away.
Fair enough. Let's move on to some news here. And speaking of, Gail, you kind of teased it with fighters being injured and dropping out. One of the more anticipated fights, at least of the next few months in boxing, was a battle between Tim Tszyu and former unified welterweight champion Keith Thuman. Thuman moving up to 154 pounds, fighting Tszyu at a catchweight of Thurman at a former unified champion at 147, fighting Thurman at a catchweight of 155. Well, we now, over the past 24 hours, learned that Thurman entered his bicep in training, had to withdraw. The guy who steps in, the albatross, or coming from the boxing albatross family, as I like to call him, Sebastian Fundora. Many people still can't get out of their minds that stunning loss to Ocampo last year. But when he's on his game, Fundora is a difficult out at 154 pounds. We still are waiting to see has he fully recovered mentally from that knockout loss. We will get to see when he fights Thurman later on this month, Gail.
Yes, we will. I hope everybody listening to this discussion remembers when watching this fight, win or lose, that Tim Tszyu said, "I'm not backing out, bring it on." He could have easily said, this is not what I signed up for. Legitimately, he has been training for a completely different fighter, completely different style. But he said, nope, that's fine. Title defense, I'm good. Let's go. Good for him. Boxing needs more Tim Tszyu. That's why he is becoming so popular. That's why he's building a fan base day by day, week by week in the United States, in the Tszyu SA, as he likes to say. And maybe he loses by a fluke. Stranger things have happened in boxing. Fundora is just a very odd talent. His height, his awkwardness, combined with the power, but he can be hit. You just don't know what you're going to get. So I'm fascinated by it. I dare say that there's more intrigue now in this matchup than there was against Keith Thuman in a lot of ways. However, earlier today, I said, and I'm going to say it again before Fundora got locked in, I would really rather have seen him face Fundora's original opponent, Sergey Bohachuk of Ukraine, who's a darn good fighter, who's tough, who's one of those guys that brings it. It would have been an absolute war. Bohachuk, in my opinion, is much better than people give him credit for. He is promoted by Tom Loeffler of 360 Promotions. Tom's got an eye for that Eastern European talent. Remember, he had Gennady Golovkin under his wing for a long time. But, the fight goes on. The main event is saved. Without this main event, there was discussion about, can we elevate the co-main? Can we keep it going? It would have fallen apart. Honestly, this is what needed to happen to preserve what is PBC on Prime's very first outing. I'm a little concerned about a lot of the discussion, about the difficulties that have surrounded this fight. And as we were also discussing behind the scenes before going live,
In the piss poor promotion or lack
they're
thereof.
their very first edition of what their versions of All Access or 24/7 was just launched on Amazon Prime on Friday. That didn't last very long. If you didn't watch it over the weekend, it's out of date. Leading up to, it was a two-part series leading up to the Tszyu Thurman fight. So, but what it tells you also, once again, is what happens when these guys are so inactive. Now, if you've heard Thurman's interviews lately, and he's talked to everybody at length, he has talked to everybody. He's insisted, I have been busy the whole time. I've been in the gym. I've been preparing for fights. Staying in shape. Yeah, okay, fine. It's not the same as preparing for a fight that is on the calendar with a known opponent. And it is certainly not the same as getting in the ring. And you have somebody in his mid-30s who's perhaps got a basic level of fitness. Good for him. But he tears a bicep. Why do we think that happened? I think it seems pretty obvious, He's getting down to the very end of training camp, and he suffered an injury, probably due to overuse, overtraining, or he was training at a level for which he wasn't quite physically prepped. He didn't have the basic level of fitness he needed because he's been so inactive. He hasn't ever fight in 2 years. Whether he gets back on the calendar or not,
And moving up
I'm
in
not
weight
real
with that
sure.
extra muscle as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, and what also happens is, as some of us older athletes know, you think you can still do the same things as you did 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, right? And then you try and you think, I guess not. But you're feeling good at a certain level. You feel pretty good. You give it a try, and nature hauls you up by the collar and says, not so fast. So I wish Thurman well. I feel no ill will for him at all. I think he's a good guy in general. He's always very generous with his time. God knows he was doing his best to promote this fight. But I think his future is very questionable, depending on the level of injury. All we know is it was bad enough that in 12 days he wasn't going to be ready. So there it is.
Some comments here in terms of our read some comments here in the chats. In terms of our earlier discussion about William Zepeda, Beagle 47 says he wouldn't mind seeing Zepeda Matias Winner get Tank. I guess seeing Zepeda and Tank. If so, and Zepeda has more experience as Tank is no slouch, even with the time off. What you need says that he thinks in his mind that Thurman ducks Tszyu.
Quack, quack.
He says that he would rather see Tszyu versus Lubin. He thinks that Lubin is a better fight. And ironically enough, the early negotiation was for a fight between Tszyu and Lubin, and then until all of a sudden word broke that a deal was done with Thurman, which left Lubin just surprised because it hit him. It blindsided him. Excuse me. Beagle says that he agrees with what you need assessment. Let me put this up. There you go. He also says that what you need, Tszyu wants the best, and I appreciate it. Charlo ducked him, and now Keith.
I don't know about that.
I don't know about Keith. But
Charlo, yes. Keith, I don't think so.
What? Let's just say in terms of Tszyu wanting the best, and I agree with your assessment that he has this old school mentality. Tszyu, but let's just say he beats Fundora. I mentioned it last week. The two fighters I would love to see Tszyu against. Well, I didn't mention it last week, but I'll throw these two names that I mentioned last week. The two fighters I would love to see Tszyu against moving forward: one, Virgil Ortiz; two, the guy who just won the vacant WBA belt over in Saudi Arabia, Madrimov. I think Tszyu against either of those guys would be a heck of a fight. Your thoughts on the on Thurman withdrawing Daniel and him fighting Fundora stepping in?
Well, I'll disagree with what you need saying that he ducked Tim Tszyu, but it is probably a side effect of the matter that he hasn't been in the ring for a good amount of time. And this did seem like a very short notice preparation for this type of fight in a new weight class, mind you. Because we always have to remember that if he would have remained healthy up to this fight, Thurman was essentially a career welterweight. So that's one factor that you got to play into when it comes to Thurman. Now, to me, I agree in that side with what you need in one front, that you probably would have done the same amount of business if you would have just had Rolly versus Pitbull be the main event of this card, because in reality neither that or Tim Tszyu versus Keith Thurman screams pay-per-view. But it is what it is in that front. But you got to give props to Tim Tszyu that he wanted to stay in the card. He wanted to be active. He wants to make a good impression on an American audience, even though he has fought in the U.S. before. But he wants to make an impression as a headliner with an American audience on a new platform. Now, I probably would have leaned more towards Lubin since you were already discussing details in it, but I think the way the Thurman announcement was done may have soured the note when it came to Lubin. So you have somebody like Fundora, that was probably seen as somebody that would already be the champion by now if he didn't get caught by Mendoza. That he likely would have been a legitimate unification fight at this point instead of what it's trying to be a unification via the WBC. It's going to be interesting to see how he fares in this fight with Tim Tszyu, even though I think he'll win. I think at this point he'll be the better overall fighter at this point in their careers between him and Fundora. But we have to remember, Tim Tszyu has been training specifically for Keith Thurman. And now you have a situation where in less than 2 weeks' time, now you got to prepare for somebody that's taller, has a little bit high reach, and has a point to prove in Fundora. Because we have to remember, he probably still wants to get that taste of the Mendoza loss out of his mouth. And B, he probably, as a big brother, you probably don't want to be shown up in many people's eyes by your little sister. Because we can all agree that Gabby Fundora has put in her work to get the notoriety that she's gotten. And Sebastian has to be able to proceed in that area and get more on his name. And it's a good, like I said, overall it's a decent move. I probably would have went with Rolly and Pitbull being the main event, but I get this is more for Tim Tszyu situation. This was Tim Tszyu pushing his team, pushing the fight. So good on them for at least remaining active and not holding it off. And we'll see how it is in between 12 days from now.
There
You
is.
disclosed a bit of breaking news regarding this card, Gail. Do tell.
I'm sorry, I don't know what you're referring to. Breaking news
About
on this card.
well, excuse me. You said Berhuchik will fight Brian Mendoza for the WBC interim.
Okay, yeah. Suri Boachuk, who was originally Fundora's opponent, undefeated Ukrainian, is going to face Brian Mendoza on the 30th. So Tom Loeffler pulled a little sleight of hand. What's been interesting is that both Thurman and Tszyu had been sparring with Mendoza, both of them, which I found very interesting. So Mendoza was certainly ready, and good for them for offering him a spot. So, yeah, that's an addition, and we'll see how that one goes. They managed to save a paycheck. Boachuk has had a lot of fights canceled on him from through the months. So it was nice to have him not put in a training camp for nothing and end up being the guy screwed over on the short end. So that was a very clever arrangement. Now, I will say, Rolly versus Cruz as the main event, oh, hell no. That would have been a disaster. Let's think about their last few fights. Cruz had an absolute stink bomb of a fight on, I'm trying to think what undercard it was, on the Spence Crawford undercard. It was a horrible...
Was it Spence Crawford or was it Canelo?
Yeah, gosh, gotta look that up. But whatever it was, whichever, and I'm going to verify this, Cruz had an absolutely awful performance in his last outing. And let us think about Rolly Romero's last outing. He was getting the crap beat out of him by Ismael Barroso.
41-year-old Ismael
41-year-old buzzsaw Ismael Barroso. Yeah. Yes, on the undercard of Spence and Crawford, he fought Giovanni Cabrera, who's a fighter promoted by Fighters First, Jolie Mazone and Adrian Clark. And Cabrera was undefeated, but with a very undistinguished resume. And it was a split decision that Cruz barely won. The entire arena that night got up and went and got their drinks because it was that bad. It was a horrible fight. Cruz got deducted a point for headbutting. It was just a mess. Cabrera was very cautious, was boxing around the outside. That's really all he could do. It just made for a horrible fight. And these two guys in the main event, seriously, they did not deserve it. Amazon, PBC, they weren't stupid enough to roll the dice and take a chance on that. I mean, honestly, if they hadn't rearranged an opponent for Tszyu, Fundora Boachuk was the fight most people were interested in outside the main event, and some people more than the original main event. And it would have been an adequate main event anywhere except this particular occasion, which is supposed to be the launch of a new promoter broadcast agreement. And it's not starting well, ladies and gentlemen. It's just not starting well. I'll be there in Las Vegas. I am mainly interested to see how the promotional arrangement works, how the fight card is organized, how all the supporting issues work. You know, you've got a new production team. I imagine a lot of the same folks that were involved for years and years with Showtime will be working with Amazon, but we don't know. And think about this. It's 12 days away. We have no idea who the broadcasters are. None.
Like I said, piss poor. And I'm being kind and using those words.
It's a hell of a thing. Now, I believe I'm not going to say how I know or can't completely confirm it, but it is my belief Al Bernstein is going to be part of whatever new team pops up. But we We have no idea. There's been no confirmation who's working this fight. It's 10 days away, everybody.
Just ridiculous. Let's move on to some keep the cancellation theme going here in terms. Well, no, before we get, let's keep the cancellation theme going here. Carlos Quadras was supposed to fight Maloney on the undercard of Lomachenko and Kambosos later on this spring or early summer. Out. Have you heard any updates on who he's going to fight? Who's going to be the replacement opponent for Maloney Gill?
I have not. This is pretty recent. Carlos Quadras tore his Achilles. Ugh, that is a hell of an injury. He's had surgery in Mexico. He's posted photos from the hospital bed, all smiles. I guess it went fine, but still a little early to know who the replacement will be. There's enough time to find a replacement, especially with Maloney essentially being the hometown fighter, let's face it. And so I think they'll find somebody else for him, and, perhaps they'll, pull another mystery Mexican out. Who knows? That's scheduled May 12th in Perth, Australia. So I think they'll find somebody, and it is for the WBC interim super flyweight title. So there'll be interest. There'll be interest in somebody stepping up to take on Maloney to possibly win that interim belt.
Indeed. Interesting bout was announced late last week, Daniel. Jesse McCaskill, who's coming off of disputed decision when it came to her fight with Sandy Ryan. I certainly is one who believed that Ryan beat her that evening. I think the fight was scored a draw. Kaskilla returns to the ring, going to head over to England to fight highly regarded Lauren Price, 2020 Olympian in the Tokyo Olympics. Only 6 fights does Price have, but far advanced, despite her limited professional experience here, Daniel. Fight is going to happen in Price's hometown, right? And I know McCaskill has the experience. She's the more physical fighter. She likes to rough things up and make things ugly in there. But if Price can keep her calm and keep her nerves, when it comes to skill versus skill, physical ability, she's the more advanced fighter. I would not be one bit surprised if Lauren Price wins this fight.
Yeah, this is an interesting situation because McCaskill, like I said, has earned her accolades, and she has earned her position in the division, the sport, and the sport overall. But now you're in a position where you're going into the UK facing a very, very well-regarded and well-touted, you can still say prospect in many ways, in Price. And unfortunately, we all know the reputation when it comes to the UK and scoring, particularly when it's a UK fighter versus a non-UK fighter. So it's a situation where McCaskill is going to have to be very, very wily and be a real veteran when it comes to fighting Price. Because if you're just going to try to be purely skill for skill, she's not going to be able to match Price at this stage of her career. But if you make it a little bit frustrating, if you make it a little bit rougher than what Price is used to, then you have a bit of a chance. And if you make it enough times, enough rounds, you might be able to negate any sentiment that you may have when it comes to UK home cooking. It is an interesting fight. We know, unfortunately, that McCaskill, she has a lot more behind her as far as her career than ahead. But it is definitely going to be a very interesting fight. It's going to be a crossroads, many fights in the way, because you're going to have the wily veteran facing the young, hot prospect.
Quick word on this bout, Gail, because Price, there was talk about her potentially fighting Natasha Jonas later on this year. Jonas coming off of the win against Michaela Mayer in January. But now she gets the title fight of her own, fighting McCaskill.
I like it. I like the matchup. I like bringing the energy of the British fans and the women's professional boxing scene into this fight against an American opponent. You've got two fan bases coming together. They're a good match. It's a good match. I'm all for it. And should Harper win, it strengthens her position going into any fight with Jonas, makes that fight domestically in the UK even bigger. And that really is her long-term goal. So
do you mean if Price wins?
If Price wins, did I say? Yeah, I said McCaskill. Price. Sorry. If Price wins, that makes the fight even bigger. And I like the fact that she's taking a chance on herself as the less experienced fighter, but she's kind of a bright burning light in British women's boxing right now. So good for her. She's betting big on herself. She might lose, but I think the British fans understand often much better than American fans do that a loss does not mean you throw the fighter baby out with the bathwater, that testing yourself and daring to be great, even with a loss, is preferred to sitting on your backside or taking layup fights.
Yeah, indeed, I agree with you 100%. Let's move on to previews some fights here, because the goal is to try to keep this in under 60 minutes. We're going to split this card up. March 23rd in Sheffield, England. A Matchroom promoted card, promoted event that's going to air on the Zone. Going to you, Daniel. I think Gail, she mentioned Terri Harper with an eye on this card while discussing Price and McCaskill.
I absolutely did. I'm way ahead of myself there. I was thinking, Terri Harper. Yes, not Lauren Price.
The aforementioned Terri Harper, who was the champion at 154 pounds, decided to drop that belt to move down to 147 and fight Ryan, who we talked about just a few minutes ago. Ryan defending that WBO welterweight title against Harper. Harper, she feels that she's going to be more comfortable at 147 as opposed to 154. Another domestic fight, Daniel, between basically two world champions going against each other. I like it. Who do you have winning?
I would normally say Sandy Ryan, since she's the more comfortable welterweight, but we do have to look at how much of a renaissance, in many ways, Terri Harper's had of a career. Fortunately, since we watched her literally have her brain reset while standing up at the hands of Alicia Baumgartner. Because think about it, not only did she move up several weight divisions after having that type of loss, that type of knockout, but doing it exceptionally well to the point where you could tell she was a lot more comfortable. Because it's going to be interesting to see how she's going to fare at 147. And Ryan is going to have, like I said, she's going to have a chip on her shoulder because of the situation that happened with McCaskill. And they know this is a domestic fight. When it comes to domestic fights, the UK really does like to bring it, especially among the women fighters. And it's a tough thing to gauge. I would normally have said Ryan, but I've learned not to count out Terri Harper. And I think she has a fairly good shot We just have to see how comfortable she is in the first 2 rounds, being at 147, or seeing if 154 was actually her more optimal weight.
And the defending champion, as an aside, Sandy Ryan has been doing some sparring in recent weeks with one, Clarissa Shields. So you can't get any better than that in terms of preparation. So it's going to be a good fight. I'm not going to pick a winner here. I just hope it turns out to be as good. I hope it turns out to be a good fight between, again, I think fighters who are basically world champions fighting each other. That's going to be the undercard of the main event. Interesting bout at 140 pounds, Gail. Dalton Smith, who's gotten a lot of buzz in British boxing circles. They think that he's a future world champion at 140 pounds. The problem is, and I wrote an article about this for Three Kings Boxing. Please check out Three Kings Boxing, your source for pure unadulterated boxing information. Shout out to the entire Three Kings Boxing crew. 2K, aka Prodigy of Boxing Talk, the man behind Three Kings, Bo, head of media relations, senior writer, who you've heard on the show numerous times. I'm a senior writer. Shout out to the other senior writer, Bakari, Red, who does all the editing behind the scenes, Lord Zoe, Jay, Corey, all the contributors behind the scenes. The thing about Smith, despite the glowing assessment over in England, he hasn't fought the level of competition, right? He gets that opportunity in terms of a name, at least, fighting Zepeda, multiple-time world title challenger. But in his last bout, Gail, Zepeda was outboxed by Richardson Hitchens. He's, 34 now? People believe he's longer than two, but I think styles make fights, and I think that Zepeda is going to give Smith a tough fight because Dalton Smith is not the mover that Hitchens is. Zepeda can still crack. He can still take a punch, and he has that experience. Time to step up and prove things for Dalton Smith, who believe a win here is going to put him at world level.
Ugh, I don't know about Zepeda being much of a threat. Yeah, let's remember that fight against Richardson Hitchens. Yeah, he went the 12-round distance. The scorecards were 120 to 108 twice, and a single mercy round for Zepeda at 119 to 109 in September. That's a very, very ugly scorecard for somebody who's as much a veteran as Jose Zepeda. 6 months later, he's coming back here to face a fighter, young, fresh, undefeated, 70, just a shade under 74% knockout rate. Ugh. This is a changing of the guard kind of fight. I just don't like to see guys like Zepeda who, took so much heat with not much to show on his own account for 12 rounds coming into a fight like this. But he took it. His team took it. It is a great test for Smith at the level he is now. And you're right. A lot of British fighters tend to fight domestic opponents up to the point where they've run through everybody. So this is a good test for Smith to take on. Even as faded as Zepeda is, he still does have history. He is really fighting a reputation in front of him and not a person, because I just don't think Zepeda has a lot to offer.
And I think we're going to end things on that note.
I'm going to just note a couple of few items. We didn't get to it. Let's briefly mention that for the fourth time, the Jack Catterall, Josh Taylor fight has been postponed for a month.
How many times you get injured, man?
That's the fourth. Yeah, this apparently some kind of eye procedure. Josh Taylor isn't really being very forthcoming about what it was, but it's only been delayed 4 weeks, so cross your fingers, everybody. And late news, Ring Magazine is reporting via Jake Donovan, tip of the hat to Jake, one of the best in the business, that the WBO is going to make the winner of Tszyu Fundora the WBO mandatory at 154, and that Terrence Bud Crawford has filed for the mandatory status to be enforced because as the title holder in the division below, he has the right to challenge for the belt in another division. Those are the WBO's rules. So could we possibly get sometime this year Crawford Tszyu?
Repeat that again for the people in the back who didn't hear that.
So if you're a title holder, a WBO title holder, and there's a belt available in another division without a title holder, which WBO belt at 154 is not held at the moment, you have the right to challenge for it as another title holder. It's a rule specific only to the WBO. And once you've got the active title holder, the winner of Tszyu Fundora for that title, Crawford has the right to challenge if he wants to move up. So the WBO would order negotiations and give the winner of the fight on March 30th 180 days to face Crawford, in theory. Now, whether the WBC decides to wedge their foot in the door, override it, good luck with that. But yeah, we do have the serious potential of the winner facing Crawford, giving him an actual fight. And if we assume it's Tszyu, we could have Bud Crawford versus Tim Tszyu coming up sometime late this year. And I am all for it. And it's one of the rare pieces of good news right now in boxing. Looking forward on the calendar. It's terrific.
So there it is. Late breaking right as we get ready to sign off. It looks like Bud is signed as petitioned to be the mandatory, and as a WBO champion, he has that right. And should he position it, he will get it and become mandatory by the WBO at 154 pounds. So that's kind of a sign of what could be upcoming for Bud Crawford, and that is the winner of Tim Tszyu and Fundora, especially if it's one Tim Tszyu. And I think we're going to end things on that hot note. I want to thank everybody who joined us in the live chat. Appreciate you, Beagle. Appreciate you what you need for your questions and your comments. If you have not done so, please make sure you hit that like button, and please make sure to subscribe to get notifications for all future episodes or anything Pound for Pound Boxer Report related. I go to the panel here. We begin with ladies first, and then we end with ladies first. Gail from nyfights.com. For those who want to talk all things boxing, let the folks know where they can hit you up.
Yes, you're welcome. That we were not injured and did not reschedule tonight, unlike others. We are here and we got through it, and I'm at least intact with no injuries. I can't speak for the two gentlemen, but you'll find me at nyfights.com, nyfights.com. If you're going to be in Las Vegas for Tszyu Fundora, got to make sure I'm saying that right. Get used to it. I will be there for New York Fights. Look me up. And thanks for listening. And thank you to our chatters for their input. Always makes it a better show every time.
Indeed. And last but certainly not least, I go to you, Daniel, from 4 Boxing News and the Inscriber Podcast. For those who want to talk the sweet science, for those who want to talk pro wrestling, for those who want to talk the NBA, especially when it comes to the Miami Heat, let the folks know where they can find you.
All right, folks, on Twitter, Threads, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, everything's the same. Ruckus 99, RWKUZ 99. Catch me on there because we'll definitely try to keep up as the sport goes along, even with almost everybody starting to drop like flies at this point. But we know we're going to be able to get real good fights coming out of it. And if you think about it already, you got a better fight when it came to the Tim Tszyu situation.
Indeed. On the next episode of Pound for Pound Boxer Report, we will do a recap of Dalton Smith and Jose Zepeda, a recap of Terri Sandy Ryan, defending her welterweight title against Terri Harper, and we will do a preview of a lot of fights that's happening from the 29th to the 31st. On March 29th, Oscar Valdez is going to fight Liam Wilson in the 12th round of 130-pound contest. Bout for all the belts at 105 pounds between unified women's strawweight champions Anissa Estrada and Costa Valle. One of the fights of the year. This should be the main event, in my opinion, not Valdez and Wilson. Give the ladies their respect. They should be the main event, given the magnitude of the bout and given how good the fighters are. Those two fights are going to be held again March 29th, Glendale, Arizona, on ESPN Plus on the 30th. The aforementioned Tim Tszyu and Sebastian Fundora, that's going to be on March 30th in Las Vegas on the undercard. Rolling Romero fighting Isaac Cruz. Iruslandi Lara fighting Michael Sarafa. Again, that's on the 30th in Las Vegas. We will talk about those fights. Also on the 30th, Gilberto Ramirez is going to be fighting. Help me pronounce his name, Gail, because I know I'll butcher it. Is she still here?
No idea who's in that particular bout.
Arson Gular.
Oh, Gulamarian. Oh, Gilbert. Oh, Zurdo Ramirez. I'm like Gilberto Ramirez. Oh, Zurdo. Yeah. Arlen Gulamarian has been hanging on for dear life to that belt, keeping away from anybody dangerous. So Zurdo has a chance to become the newest cruiserweight champion. We're making cruiserweight great again.
Thank you. That's going to be on the that's going to be on the 30th. On the zone, the Tszyu Fundora card is going to be on Amazon Prime. Those fights on the same night, on the 30th, excuse me. On the 31st, the last day of March, the Shigioka brothers going to defend their strawweight belts. Yadai Shigioka is going to defend the WBC title against Melvin Jerusalem. Genjiro Shigioka is going to fight a guy by the name of Andala Shigioka. Is the IBF title holder at 105 pounds. So for those who want to look for some boxing, get up early in the morning and check out those bouts. The Shigioka brothers return to the ring March 31st in Nagoya, Japan. Also on the 31st in London, Fabio Wardley, Fraser Clark going to fight a grudge match over their heavyweight bout there. So a lot of boxing is going to happen on the 29th through the 31st. So again, I want to thank everybody who joined us, their comments and whatnot in the lively chatter, in the live chat. Shout out to Beagle, shout out to What You Need. For Gail from Communities, excuse me, for Gail from nyfights.com, Daniel from 4 Boxing News, and the Inscriber. This has been episode 439 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. And oh yeah, I forgot to mention, for those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness with yours truly, you can check me out on Twitter, Brother JR at Brother JR76. For those who want to talk boxing, music, fitness, and fragrance on TikTok and IG, or what is left of TikTok for the time being, you can do so, Brother JRSC. Again, for Gail, for Daniel, this has been episode 439 of the Pound for Pound Boxing Report. I'm your host, Michael. We will see you guys next time. Everyone have a good evening. Good night.
Good night, folks.